Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is L. Lauren, and I am the author of the story you're about to listen to. This week's story is another one that is hot off the press. I finished it last week, edited it this week, and I am working on getting it up for pre-order right now. The title is In Love with My Work Rival, and it is part of my In Love With series. I'm having a lot of fun writing these books. The tropes include age gap, work rival, forced proximity, game show, hurt comfort, a little bit of enemies to lovers, military, and protector. I hope you guys enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed writing it. Thank you.
In Love with My Work Rival. L. Lauren. Chapter 1. Asa. The best thing about working was the 5 minutes before clocking out after a long, arduous day. The work itself wasn't particularly arduous, but associating with an office full of people Asa would have never hung out with otherwise was. He stood out like a sore thumb for so many reasons, starting with his floppy afro of curls and ending with his perhaps unique life experiences. 5 years of his life had been stolen from him, and while it had been from no fault of his own, he couldn't get the time back or get rid of the experience. As a result, the whole office scene overwhelmed him. At least one coworker stopped by his desk every hour, announcing their presence with a cheerful hello, which startled Asa every time. His boss, too, would come by a few times a day with folded arms and an unreadable expression. Asa didn't mind his boss as much, but the assistant president of the company had it out for him, and he really had no idea why. Luckily, their paths didn't cross as much, and Asa could live with it. Getting the job at all had been something of a miracle because Asa wasn't the ideal candidate. In fact, he hadn't even applied. The boss had found him, requested his help on a project, and the rest was history. He was an artist. Not a trained one, not a fancy one. The only art instruction he'd ever had was through his friends on the street, learning how to layer spray paint. He'd been sitting at the park when the boss spotted him. The man had paused his run, tucked a sweat rag in his pocket, and motioned to Asa's work. A short conversation later, they had scheduled a meeting for the next day, and a year of projects later, well, Asa had a steady job doing something he loved, something he'd been told he had a natural eye for. As he walked to the time clock, he said his goodbyes, poking his head into cubicles and wishing each person a good afternoon and night. He typed in his number, and then he stepped outside, taking a deep breath of freedom. His next stop was dinner at his favorite burger place with his best friend, Lionel. He arrived first, grabbed their usual seat and ordered their usual, scrolling on his cell phone and sipping a beer as he waited for his buddy to arrive. "Hey man. Sorry I'm late," Lionel greeted him, shrugging off his jacket as he slumped down in the seat across from Asa. "I got held up at the shop." "Is everything good?" "Yeah." Lionel shook his head. "Some lady strolled in at closing saying she had an appointment, and she did 5 hours ago. But it was an oil change, so I went ahead and did it for her." "So kind of you." "I know, right?" Lionel grinned. "Can't let the old ladies drive around with bad oil. Anyway, she didn't even tip, but whatever. How are you doing?" "I'm fine. Work was work." "Yeah. Man, I never expected you to end up with some cushy desk job. Like, I expected a lot of things, but 10 years ago, if you would have told me you'd be kicking it with some upper middle class folks every day, I would have called you a liar." "I know. It's wild." Their food came a few minutes after Lionel settled, and the conversation lapsed while they ate. Lionel finished first and slouched back in his seat. "Say, did you hear about the charity event the Innocence Project is hosting?" Asa looked up. "What kind of event?" "It's some silly love at first sight game show type of knockoff. Basically, they match singles up, and the singles have to spend the weekend together, and then at the end of the weekend they're interviewed. I guess the ones who everyone votes on as the happiest couple wins something. People will do anything these days for an hour of entertainment," Asa muttered, finishing the last bite of his burger with a sigh. "You're not lying, but it could be pretty fun. Plus, it brings awareness to the organization, and since they actually helped you, you should support them. I'm not getting matched up with a stranger for a weekend. There's no fucking way, man." "Oh, come on. There's a whole questionnaire you fill out, so it's not a complete stranger. They're going to use a local matchmaker and a local dating expert to make sure each pairing is at least an on-paper match." "If you think it's such a good idea, you do it," Asa teased. "You know I can't. My girl would send me to my grave if I did." Lionel tapped on his cell phone before passing it across the table to Asa. "Here's the questionnaire. Why did you pull it up so fast?" "Oh, my girl and I answered the questions the other day for fun. They're pretty good questions, all things considered." Asa shook his head. "You know what? Why the hell not?" Laughing, he picked up Lionel's cell phone and went through the questions, answering them as they shared another couple beers and ordered an ice cream dessert. When he was done, he shook his head and passed the cell phone back. "The questions were pretty good, weren't they?" "They weren't bad. I'm sure some people can lie about them if they wanted, but I'm sure it would be far more fruitful to be honest. Some were cheesy, like, what makes you exceptional? Like, I don't know, the fact that I'm in my late 20s and still alive is pretty exceptional to me, honestly." Lionel chuckled. "You're right, but you know they have to gear it to all types." "Yeah," Asa finished off his beer and sighed. "I should get going. The boss is wanting an extra meeting tomorrow to finalize all the images for the project, and I need all my sleep to deal with him." "Yeah, no problem. Tell your girl I said hey and I missed her this week." Lionel smiled. "Sure thing, man. Text me if you get accepted to the game show." "Oh God, yeah. I'll let you know." Chapter 2. Boris. Boris swirled his glass of bourbon before bringing it to his lips for another taste as he peered around the establishment. His favorite dancers weren't there, but it was a weekday night, so he didn't fully expect them to be. Even without them, though, the establishment had the most relaxing atmosphere, and sip after sip, he slowly shed the day's stress. He wasn't supposed to be drinking alone, but his best friend and business partner hadn't arrived yet. As he finished the last of his drink, the owner of the establishment came by his table with a smile. "Boris," he greeted the other man. "How have you been?" "I'm doing well," he replied with a smile. "How are you, Rex?" "I'm good. I finally heard back from my military disability report about my hearing, and I got some real fancy hearing aids." "Do you need those?" Boris lifted his eyebrows. "According to my paperwork, I do. I got a little extra percentage after I told them I had troubles with my wife, because if the stress of having been in the service too." "Man," Boris groaned. "Why? Why not? It's not like they're going to prove it." "Maybe they're not, but do you want all of your business out there? I can understand the hearing aids, but the rest? Nah, not for me." "You're too proud to get that extra $130 a month," Rex challenged, grinning. Boris shook his head. "Sure," he chuckled. "I'm too proud for the extra $130 a month. I already have a nice bit of compensation for the PTSD, and I think I'm going to leave it alone there." "Yeah," Rex sobered as Boris mentioned PTSD. It was an open secret retired military personnel struggled mentally, but unlike erectile dysfunction, it wasn't talked about or even looked kindly on. Boris wasn't sure why it had been so difficult explaining to a social worker and a psychologist spending several years overseas in underdeveloped nations with unstable government systems had done a number on his mental health. And even when the Veterans Affairs finally relented, the compensation wasn't enough for him to live off. The need for more income drove him to opening a local advertisement firm with one of their mutual army brothers, JB. JB was all the charisma, while Boris was the intelligence. He had gotten his bachelor's in business before he joined the army, and now, 2 decades later, it was coming in handy. I'm real glad you got it, man, Rex added eventually, squeezing Boris' shoulder. My wife says I should put in for it too, but I don't know. You should, Boris cut him off. Your wife is right. She's always right, JB said as he strolled up, shrugging off a jacket before he sat down across from Boris. What's she right about this time? Bo was just telling me I ought to listen to my wife and try to get some compensation for PTSD. Yep, JB laughed. She's right. Sorry I'm late. Right as I was walking out, this representative for the Innocence Project stopped by. Why? Both Boris and Rex asked at the same time. Ah. I believe they're hosting some charity event, a game show this year, and they wanted to know if we would donate or even participate. What's the Innocence Project? Rex arched an eyebrow. It's an organization focused on helping innocent people get out of jail or prison, Boris offered. I believe one of our employees has been positively affected by the organization. Asa, JB said. Now, I don't know if they're really innocent. If you are in the position to be targeted, then you shouldn't be out getting into trouble anyway, Boris grunted. But even still, it is a worthy cause. I'm glad you think so because I agreed, and I volunteered you. JB smiled. You did what? Boris stared at him. Rex chuckled. Well, I couldn't do it. They said they're doing a local dating show, and Lucia would kill me if I volunteered myself. Besides, you've been single a while, and you ought to get back on the scene. Boris groaned. I don't know. Oh, come on. You're getting on up in years, but you're not dead yet, JB chided. Rex nodded his agreement, and Boris just sighed. All right, well, what are the rules? As far as I understand it, you have to fill out the questionnaire, and they're going to match you with another single applicant who fits yours the best, done by a local matchmaker. Then you and the person have to spend the weekend together. You're interviewed the following Monday about the experience, and I think the audience votes for a winner. Lovely. Boris shook his head. No one can find love in a weekend, but I suppose I'm willing to participate. I can put up with anyone for a weekend. Rex chuckled. Sure you can. The question may be if they can put up with you. JB and Rex laughed, and Boris simply shook his head again. I'm glad you two are amused. Where is this questionnaire I have to complete? JB relayed the information, and for the remainder of the evening, Boris worked on the questionnaire on his cell phone while the other two relaxed, catching up on various topics since the previous week. The questions, he had to admit, were questions he hadn't considered in a long time. They were questions about his life, his values and belief systems, and his future. Once he had submitted it, he sat back in his seat and sighed. He didn't like being hopeful, but something about the questionnaire gave him a little inkling of it. What if this local matchmaker actually did manage to match him with someone who he was compatible with? What if he fell in love with this stranger he was forced to spend the weekend with? What if things turned out perfect? Chapter 3. Asa. Friday night came too fast for him, and he ran around his apartment getting dressed. He tried on outfit after outfit and discarded each for different reasons. One was too formal. The next was too casual. What time is it? Asa called, poking his head in the living room where Lionel sat with a beer in his hands and his feet kicked up on the coffee table. You got like an hour before you have to get out of here. Right? Great. Asa groaned. I can't decide if I should be formal or casual. What's the event dress code supposed to be? It didn't really give one. I just imagine they would want you relatively put together. Okay. Lionel sipped his beer. Why don't you wear something you might wear to a casual but nice event? No kicks, but decent jeans would be okay. Dressing formally is the worst thing about being grown, Asa muttered as he ducked away again. 3 more outfits down, he settled on a pair of dark jeans, loafers, a t-shirt and a stylish jacket. He wanted to be cool, but not too cool. He also wanted to be put together, but not overdone. With a sigh, he fussed with his hair next, removing his hair tie and letting a waterfall of curls fall around his shoulders. He considered leaving it down, but instead he opted for 2 cornrow braids with the ends traveling down his back. "This is your 10-minute warning," Lionel called from the living room. Asa inserted sparkling earrings in his ears. "Almost ready," he called back, giving himself a once-over in the mirror before grabbing his keys and cell phone and headed for the exit. "Hey," Lionel said as he reached the door. Asa paused. "Good luck, man. You look good." "Thanks." A blush touched Asa's cheeks. Then he left, driving across town to the event center. His nerves grew during the drive, and his hands were trembling by the time he parked the vehicle. He wanted to back out, to go home and put this whole thing behind him. He wasn't the kind of guy for this. He wasn't straight-laced or suburban. He'd been through hell and back figuratively. Keeping his word was the only thing that got him out of his car and walking towards the building. His feet were lead and the ground was tar, and by the time he reached the door he was exhausted. Thankfully, as soon as he reached the door, it swung open, and a bubbly woman ushered him inside. She took his name and information, and soon enough, he was whisked in another direction and another, and then led to the stage. When they announced his name, the stage director pushed him into the spotlight, and shaky legs carried him up to the host. "And next we have Asa," a woman with legs 10 miles long announced, placing a hand on his back as she helped him to the middle of the stage. Amidst the blinding studio lights, he saw almost nothing, and he was grateful for it. "Hi," he breathed, clasping his hands together in front of him. "Hi, Asa." Asa is in his late 20s, he's a working artist, and he was personally helped by our program, so he knows just how powerful such an organization can be. "We're so happy to have you on our show." "Thank you. I'm happy to be here." His voice almost squeaked over his words, but he was trying his best to stamp down his nerves. To accent his words, he gave a bit of a lopsided smile. "So, are you ready to be set up by a professional matchmaker?" "No. I'm nervous," Asa confessed. The host laughed. "Don't be nervous. What if you meet the person of your dreams?" "True," he conceded. "First, we've got to ask you a few questions." "Sure. Let's start with something easy. What's your favorite thing to do when you have time off of work?" "An easy one?" He lifted his eyebrows with a smile. "Well, when I get time off of work, I like to have experiences. I like sports and being active, so I like bowling and mini-golf." "Oh, fun. I bet you and your match are going to have a lot of exciting outings this weekend." "Okay, next question. If money wasn't an object to you, what would you do with your life and your time?" "If money wasn't an object, I would probably travel around. I know everyone says it, but I've never really gotten the chance to travel, and I've always wanted to see other places. I would probably take up photography too, and photograph some of the places I travel to." "Good answer." She smiled. "Okay, last one, and I think we'll have your match ready for you. What are you looking for in a partner?" "Way to hit the nail on its head, huh?" Asa murmured, before projecting his voice again. "I figured it was only a matter of time before you asked this one. Let me think. Besides the obvious stuff like loyalty and communication, I want someone I can learn from, someone who has goals and dreams that weave through mine. And of course, I want someone who's cute." The host giggled. "I think we all want the last one." "Okay, now step over here," she guided him to the right side of the stage, "and we're about to bring out your match. Drumroll, please." The audience roared. Asa looked towards the left side of the stage, holding his breath as a silhouette formed backstage and then emerged onto the stage. As soon as his gaze landed on the other man, his heart stopped. It wasn't love at first sight, though. Not even close. The man who walked on stage was none other than Boris Coleman, one of the senior managers of the advertising firm, and the one man he was confident hated his guts. Boris Coleman was a stunning man. He was tall and square-built, and dressed in a tailored blazer, he looked even better. His coily black hair was always neatly trimmed and styled, and he didn't bother dyeing the little flecks of salt at his edges and hairline. Boris Coleman also was the one person in the entire firm who thought he didn't deserve to be there. When their eyes met, Boris hardened to ice, but he continued on the stage and plastered a smile on his face. "Let me introduce Mr. Boris Coleman to the stage," the bubbly host said. "You guys have a 94% compatibility rating based on the questionnaires you filled out, which is the highest percentage of all of our contestants." The host continued speaking, but Asa's pounding heart and rushing blood drowned out her voice. He had to spend the entire weekend with Boris fucking Coleman. Chapter 4. Boris. How often were matchmakers completely wrong? Because there was absolutely no way Boris had a 94% compatibility rate with Asa, unless they were talking about DNA. In which case, everyone had a considerably high compatibility rate. Asa looked appalled. Boris had a better game face, but he wasn't much happier. He gave the host a dazzling smile as he strolled across the stage and stood on her empty side. "Mr. Boris Coleman," she announced, "is a retired Army veteran, and now is part owner of a local advertising firm. This firm so generously donated to our cause, and also gave us the pleasure of helping one of their own find love. I asked Asa a few questions about what he's looking for, but I'm going to ask you something a little different." She was beaming. "Sure, ask me anything," Boris encouraged. "Okay. Tell me what a perfect first date for you and Asa might be. Where are you guys going after this?" Asa glowered. Boris, if only to spite Asa, flashed a $1,000 smile. "Well, I really like experiences for dates. This new outdoor arcade opened downtown, so I figured we could check it out, and after, if things are still going well, we could get a bite to eat and sit at the park and get to know each other a little better." Asa's glower dropped away, and his eyes had narrowed, gaze skeptical. When the host turned back to him, however, he feigned a more pleasant expression. "Asa," she prompted, "does an outdoor arcade and dinner at the park sound like a fun time to you?" "Yes," he replied. "I love arcade games." The host clapped. "Perfect. Okay guys, so you know the rules. You two get to spend the entire weekend together getting to know each other, and then Monday morning, you will report back and we'll interview you. Are you excited?" Asa gave a slight nod. Boris, somewhat reveling in the other one's discomfort, gave a more accepting nod. "If you guys walk off the stage to the left, we'll get you guys all set up for your magical weekend together." As they walked off, the host announced the next contestant. The organization took their information, explained the rules for the 100th time, and then left them to their own devices. At this point, Asa's halfway pleasant glower had turned into a prominent frown, and Boris no longer derived amusement from making the other uncomfortable. It was reality now, and they were stuck together for 2 days. "It's just 2 days," Boris said eventually. "2 days of my life I'll never get back," Asa replied. "Anyone can spend 2 days with another person. It's not the worst thing in the world." Asa folded his arms. "I bet not, but I'm supposed to be working up from neutral to like, not from dislike to neutral. I didn't realize you harbored so much distaste for me." "Well, it's easy to harbor distaste for someone who thinks he owns the world, and his experiences are the only valid ones. I know you didn't want to hire me, because of my background. I know you think I'm some felon dripping with drugs and throwing gang signs when I tie my shoes," Asa snapped. "Why would I want to spend the weekend with someone who hates everything I am?" "It's a weekend, Asa," Boris sighed, rolling his eyes. "For you," Asa corrected, "it's a weekend. For me, it's a repeat of things I experience daily. Let's just get this over with. I have 2 roommates, so we can't stay at my place. I would have never offered to stay at your place. I will give you my address. You can get your things, and then come get settled. I will prep the extra bedroom for you." "Sure. I guess I'll see you in a little while," Asa resigned, wandering back to his vehicle and driving away. Boris stood in the parking lot as he left. He had his reservations, but he was also willing to try it out. Maybe something in the matchmaking questionnaire had been right. Maybe there was some potential. Giving a second look at Asa, he was shockingly attractive. He had fox-like eyes, a smooth heart-shaped face, and full bee-stung lips that naturally parted at the center. He had a youthful and fresh glow about him Boris could adjust to. Plus, he looked damn good from behind. Boris drove back to his place and browsed around his house, now quite aware of all of his quirks and flaws. Was his house too clean? Was Asa going to comment on the way he had his furniture arranged just so, or the way he kept his kitchen? He bundled up those fears, as he grabbed extra sheets and blankets from the closet and set to turning the guest bedroom into a livable space for a few days. As he tucked the sheets under the mattress, his mind wandered back to Asa. What kind of sleeper was he? A hard sleeper? A soft one? Was he the type to sneak out for a midnight snack, or the type to keep a glass of water right next to his bed for when he woke up? He fluffed the pillows on the bed, texted Asa his address, and then waited, wringing his hands every minute until the younger man arrived a half hour later, and he yanked the door open for him. "Hi," Asa murmured. "Sorry it took so long. My roommate had questions." "Understandable," Boris said as he stepped out of the doorway, ushering Asa inside. "I'll take your things to the guest room, and you can make yourself comfortable. I suppose we could still go out for—" "I'd rather order in," Asa cut him off, "and save your first date idea until tomorrow. I also don't want to be this guy, but I don't think sleeping in 2 separate rooms was the idea they had in mind." "You think they would imply 2 people should sleep in the same bed the first time they meet?" Boris arched an eyebrow. "I think they were going for a married at first sight idea, so yes." Boris shook his head. "I don't think it's appropriate." "You don't think it's appropriate to sleep in the same bed as a stranger? Why? Are you bad at keeping your hands to yourself?" The older man blinked. "I am perfectly fine at keeping my hands to myself, and yet plenty of couples sleep separately every night. Perhaps they have different waking or sleeping cycles, or they're Jewish." "Aha!" Asa chuckled, closing the door behind him. "Look, I'm 100% confident we're not a real match, so it doesn't matter what we do for the weekend. We were probably just the only gay ones in the bunch, so they had no other choice but to put us together. I'm perfectly fine just staying in the guest room, so just order something for us to eat and I'll see you in a few. I'd like to freshen up." "Sure," Boris grunted. Those factors had never occurred to him, but Asa was probably right. As he had offered, he took Asa's weekend bags to the guest room, and then he dug around the kitchen for takeaway coupons, ordering a spread of food from a local Greek place, as he had often done for the office. The food arrived within the hour, and Boris placed it on the living room coffee table as he waited for Asa to emerge, and when he did, Boris' mouth dropped open before he could catch himself. He'd only ever seen Asa in his appropriate, but somewhat ill-fitting work attire with his hair put up and a scowl on his face. In casual clothes, Asa looked completely different. He looked even more stunning, with a halo of tight curls framing his face. His fitted-sleeve t-shirt highlighted all the finer details of his slim frame, and his low-set sweats highlighted his tight ass. Boris exhaled slowly. The food," he stammered as he motioned to the table. Chapter 5. Asa. He lingered in the hallway's frame as Boris stared at him, a blush creeping to his cheeks. He'd never thought of himself as ugly, but for the most part he was passed over. He was passable, nothing to linger at. However, the way Boris looked at him was different. Boris looked at him like he was hungry, and Asa was the last meal on earth. He looked at him desperately, and it made sparks explode in Asa's belly. Throwing off such a powerful and put-together man thrilled him. It made him feel sexy. "Thank you." He approached the couch and sat down next to Boris, popping open the containers and fixing himself a plate. He piled his plate with a half of a gyro, a big dollop of hummus and countless pita chips, and then he leaned back, balancing his plate in one hand as he ate. "I usually watch the news," Boris explained. His tone was a little rough around the edges, a little huskier than his usual deep baritone. "Sure," Asa agreed. Boris turned on the television first, flipping it to one of the local news channels, and then he too fixed himself a plate and sat back. Asa never watched the news. It was far too depressing and droll. He didn't watch it now either. Instead, he watched Boris from the corners of his eyes. He watched how delicately and politely the man ate, and how his brow crinkled at concerning headlines. He watched his eyelids grow heavy with sleep, and him jolt awake each time he slipped into it. Eventually, Asa finished his food and set his plate on the coffee table. "I should go to bed," he announced. "I like to wind down by reading a bit, so—" He smiled at Boris. "Sure," the older man replied, sleep weighing his voice down. "I can take this to the kitchen too, if you're finished?" "Sure," he mumbled again. Chuckling, Asa collected all the leftovers and took them into the kitchen. He condensed it into one container and then tucked it into the refrigerator. Afterwards, he escaped to the guest bedroom, went through his nightly routine, and eventually crawled into bed. The problem was it wasn't his bed or his sheets or his air. For a while he tossed and turned. As the night wore on, he sat up and grabbed his bedtime novel, flipping through several more chapters in hopes sleep will kiss him. Perhaps it had, he wasn't sure, but he gave up once the clock on the bedside table flashed 5:30. He'd attempted sleep for long enough, and with a sigh he climbed out of bed, set his book on the side table, and wandered out of the room. The place was dark, and he placed a hand against the wall for guidance, making his way into the living room and eventually into the kitchen. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he continued inside the dimly lit room, but what was supposed to be a quiet morning quickly turned otherwise when he bumped into something. He gasped. A mug of hot liquid shattered on the ground, splashing his lounge pants. Boris cried out, and in a flurry of movement, Asa found a knife pointed straight at him, gripped in Boris' trembling hand. His eyes had adjusted to the dim light. He saw Boris' panic-stricken face, his wide and wild eyes, and his white-knuckled grip on the knife, but he didn't flinch. It wasn't the first time a man had pointed a knife at him, and he doubted at this point it would be the last. Asa took his gaze from the knife to Boris. "I didn't mean to surprise you," Asa said, voice so relaxed it was almost icy. "Did you forget I was here?" "Don't sneak up on people," Boris snapped. "I could have killed you." "Doubtful," Asa replied. "And I didn't intentionally sneak up on you. It's 5:30 in the morning. I assumed you would be asleep." Once Boris pulled the knife away, Asa crouched onto the ground, collecting the biggest chunks of the fallen coffee mug. "Why?" Boris asked. "Because most people are asleep at 5:30 in the morning?" Asa blinked, glancing up at him for a moment before refocusing his attention to his task. "I mean, why are you up this early?" "I always get up this early." "Why are you up?" Boris sighed, tucking the knife back in the drawer and grabbing a towel for Asa. "I will throw the mug away," he offered as he presented the towel. Asa made the exchange, dumping all the shards in one hand and taking the towel with the other. "Well?" Asa prompted. "I couldn't sleep," Boris confessed. "Why not?" This time the older man shook his head and crossed his arms. Asa mopped up the coffee, then used a few paper towels and cleaner to wipe the floor again before he stood up and approached Boris' coffee pot. He grabbed 2 mugs and poured half of the remaining coffee in each. "How do you like your coffee?" Asa asked. "Teaspoon of sugar," Boris replied. Asa nodded, spooned out a teaspoon of sugar, and sprinkled it in one mug, using the same spoon to stir until the particles were completely dissolved. For his mug, he added a splash of milk and a spoonful of sugar as well. He stirred it, tasted it, and sighed. "I'm not used to someone in my space," Boris offered. "I've lived alone since I got out of the service." "Ah." Asa nodded. "I get you. When I was released from the pen, it took me weeks to get used to being alone all the time. In the pen, you never do anything alone. You don't even take a shit alone, and then suddenly. Asa shrugged and trailed off. Suddenly it's just you, Boris said. Suddenly it's just you, yeah. I'm sure the military is different. I know there are ranks and different benefits based on the rank, but I also know how it feels to move from a regimented life to one without those regulations. Asa slid Boris' coffee over to him. My schedule when I was locked up was to get up around 5:30 while my roommate was still asleep, get a little reading in, and when it was a little later I started daily chores, pissed, brushed my teeth, cleaned up my spot. The yard is funny. You always have to keep check over your shoulders, because anyone could come try you any time. You don't look like the type to make it there, Boris observed. Asa chuckled. I'm glad, he murmured before setting his coffee down and pulling his shirt over his head. He uncovered a maze of tattoos spiraling over his chest and down one arm. They were well done, meticulously done, but all black and white and all clearly homegrown. Do they mean something? Asa shrugged. I was scared when I got off the transport, but there are all kinds in there. First night I was there, the guy in the cell next to me died of an overdose. It was the first time I'd ever seen a dead body up close. What did you do to go to prison? He chuckled, taking another sip of his coffee and peering around the kitchen. Be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I won't say I was innocent. I'd never say it. I was running with the best of them too, but they were looking for this guy who'd robbed a liquor store, and I guess he looked like me. It doesn't matter, the pigs just wanted to call it a night. How long did you stay in? 5 years, Asa sighed. It took 3 years for my lawyer with the Innocence Project to get me out of there, and you grow up a lot in 4 years. I was a baby when I went in. I don't regret it, and I wouldn't want to change it either. Those men in there, especially the lifers, they taught me how to be a man. The rules in the pen are different. I mean, out here, fighting doesn't solve all my problems, but the lessons still ring true. Yeah, Boris replied, sipping his own coffee. Sorry. Asa offered a little smile. I'm rambling. Do you want to take a walk to clear your head? Sure. Boris' shoulders relaxed. I'll walk with you. Chapter 6. Boris. As Asa changed clothes, Boris transferred both of their coffees into travel mugs, slipped on a pair of sneakers, and met him at the door. Thank you, Asa said as he took his drink and stepped outside, tugging his light jacket closed as the morning air hit him. Colder than I expected, but I'll warm up. Better a little cold than a little hot. I can agree, Boris said, closing the front door behind him and locking it. He slipped his key into his pocket, glanced both ways down the street, and then started walking to the left. The direction was random, but the pathway to the left looked infinitely prettier than the pathway to the right. It's a lot easier to add a couple undershirts than to feel sweltering in uniform and be able to do nothing about it. Asa nodded. I bet you wore your uniform well. I can show you pictures when we get back if you want. Asa nodded again. I do. I want to see what the younger version of you looked like. You, I overheard you and Mr. JB were in the same unit? Yes. We did a few tours together, and grew really close. There's nothing like being far from home in a country whose language you don't speak to bring two men together, Boris chuckled. Nothing like being stuck in a 50-square-foot room to, well, make you damn near lose your mind. Asa's lips tugged in a sad smile. Sorry. I didn't mean to bring the mood down further. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the questions on the dating questionnaire. I can't imagine being stuck in a 50-square-foot room for multiple years. Yeah. Asa took a big gulp of his drink and glanced forward. The pain was etched in his eyes. It was something Boris had never taken notice of before. So questions? Boris forced a smile. Sure. It was a pretty long questionnaire, so we don't have to go through all of it if you don't want to. Asa took in a breath. I'll admit I was a little surprised and shocked to see you come out, and I do still partly think it was because we might have been the only two gay guys, but I'm willing to, I don't know, see if there's more. I am willing to see if there's more too. I've already learned so much more about you in the past few hours, and I'd love to learn even more. Asa took another big gulp of his drink. This time the apples of his cheeks colored. Thank you, he whispered as he dug his cell phone out of his pocket. I can pull up the questions on here. Boris nodded, and finally took a sip of his drink. I guess I'll just start at the beginning, Asa said, biting his bottom lip as he swiped over his cell phone. Okay. The first question. If you could use one positive attribute to describe yourself, what would it be? Do you want the options? No, I remember my answers. I said trustworthy. Oh, okay. Why? Boris shrugged, taking another sip of his coffee. Your word is everything, and you are nothing without it. I have had people's lives depend on me, their safety and others. I am proud of my ability to be trustworthy. What about you? This one was hard for me, honestly. It's because I didn't find some of the options to be positive attributes in the same way others were. Some were just tidbits about yourself, like being nerdy or artistic. Those aren't attributes. The only attributes are caring, trustworthy, and intellectual. I selected caring. I try to be understanding and empathetic, and I try to help people. Boris smiled. I suppose you could have selected intellectual as well. Did you give this much thought to each question? Asa frowned a little bit, glancing down the sidewalk. I did probably, yeah. Charming. What is the next question? The insecurity that resonates most with you is which one? I believe I selected I am often pessimistic because I do have a habit of considering the worst of a situation. This habit is important, though, when anticipating what could go wrong. It's just not a habit enjoyed outside of the military, I suppose. I suppose not, Asa agreed. This is another one with two split types of answers. Some of these insecurities aren't really insecurities. I selected I am too hard on myself, but I'm not sure it's an insecurity. Or, I'm not sure people generally see it as an insecurity, but it definitely can be. It can, yes, Boris agreed. They continued through the list with Boris giving his answer and explanation, and Asa overthinking every question before giving his answer and explanation, but with each one, Boris learned a considerable amount about the younger man, and he appreciated it. Yes, Asa was the one who had been imprisoned as a young adult. He had run the streets, but he was also whip-smart, as Boris' mother would say. What's the first thing you look for in a partner? Asa asked next. Oh, we don't have to answer this one, maybe. Boris chuckled. Intelligence, because I want a partner who can discuss things with me, and who can show me new ways of looking at old topics. Oh. Asa's cheeks colored, and he looked away again. I selected confidence. Did you? Yes. I feel like it's a bit of a shallow answer, but I've been with so many guys who have none, or who are expecting me to be their cheerleader, and I wanted something different. However, I feel like when someone says they want confidence, it's misconstrued as wanting arrogance, when I just mean I want someone who is proud of themselves. I understand what you mean. Boris smiled. Asa took in a breath. You're very confident, he admitted. Self-assured. You're very self-assured. Thank you. By this point, both had finished their coffee and were simply carrying the to-go mugs in their hands. The sun had fully emerged from its slumber, and the world had woken up around them. We should probably head back soon, Asa suggested. Or you could let me treat you to breakfast first. Sure. A smile lit up Asa's face. I would love to have breakfast with you. Chapter 7. Asa. They had breakfast at a diner around the corner from Boris' place, eating from a bottomless stack of pancakes and having endless refills of coffee. Asa welcomed the silence because he needed to sort through his thoughts. He had been prepared to hate Boris, to find the whole weekend absolutely insufferable, but there was something about Boris he really liked. Well, many things about Boris he liked, but also something he connected with. They'd both seen things, and truly how different was the military from prison. There was still a uniform, still dozens of rules to follow, still a strict social order. Most men came away with PTSD from both too. Asa had it for sure. It had taken him weeks to leave his bedroom, and even longer to adjust to the freedom to go anywhere he wanted at any time. Quick movements still made him jumpy, alongside loud voices. It had been years, but some trauma doesn't go away. He knew Boris had the same, whether he admitted it or not, and he retired from the military, meaning he spent a lot more years under the constant stress and hypervigilance than Asa did. He called his loss at his third stack of pancakes, eating just under half before sitting back in his seat with a groan. "I can't eat anymore," Asa lamented, dropping his head back on his shoulders. "Though I hate to waste food." "Pass them here," Boris chuckled. "I will keep you honest." "Will you?" Asa smirked, pushing the plate over to him. "Sure, as long as you flag down the server so we can get the bill." "Oh, of course." Asa sucked in a breath as Boris dug into his pancakes. There was something rather sexy about a man finishing his food, something unexpectedly kind about it. The server passed by a few moments later, and Asa tracked her with his eyes until she wandered their way. "How are we doing over here?" the server asked. "We're all right," Asa said, "but we're ready for the check if you don't mind." "Oh? Well, actually y'all's meal is on the house today. You guys are contestants on the show, right? The dating show The Innocence Project is hosting?" "We are," Asa said. "I knew it. I thought you guys were the best couple with the best tension by far, and I was happy to see the representation too. Is it too nosy of me to ask how you guys are doing? How was last night? Do you think the matchmaker is right about you?" Asa pressed a smile to his lips at all her questions. He couldn't answer half of them, but her bright face and giddy demeanor made him wish he could. "It's a bit nosy, yes, and I don't know. I believe it's going a lot better than expected." Asa blushed. "Oh, so exciting. What are you guys doing for the rest of the day? It's a truly beautiful Saturday." Boris looked up from the last quarter of pancakes. "We were going to have a tourist day around the city, actually. And then perhaps he would like to join me for dinner someplace nice." Asa's blush warmed, and he looked away from them both. "Yeah, I'll join you for dinner." "Excellent," Boris said. "Exciting," the server squealed. "I am so excited for you both. Dating is so hard, and it would be so fun to have a matchmaker do it for me. I really hope it works out for y'all, and I hope y'all have a great day." "Thank you," Asa mumbled. Boris smiled and finished the last of the pancakes, took a final sip of his coffee, and then offered a hand to Asa. "Shall we go?" Boris asked. "Sure. So what tourist things were we going to do today?" Asa tilted his head as Boris led them from the establishment. "Oh, I figured an artist would enjoy stopping by the art museum and then popping into any galleries we see along the way." Asa blinked. I would enjoy going to the art museum, yeah. I forgot which exhibition they're having right now, but I've heard from a few friends it is worth seeing." "Black folk art," Asa said. "I've been meaning to go check it out, but time always gets away from me." Boris smiled. "Then I'm glad I hit on something you'd enjoy." "Me too," Asa murmured. The museum was only a 20-minute walk away, so side by side they strolled down the sidewalk towards it. With a gallery every few blocks, the walk continued to get longer and longer, but each gallery was like opening a present on Christmas. Most of them were owned by artists Asa had never heard of, and most favored a flashy heavy paint style, but Asa loved it. More, he loved having Boris beside him too. They didn't just go inside, glimpse the art, and leave. Boris asked questions, pointed out specific pieces, and even purchased one they had both concluded was the best in the show. It was one Asa couldn't stop staring at. He'd gotten lost in the swirled brushstrokes and the airy colors. The last gallery before they reached the museum was tucked away behind a hardware store, but its roadside sign made its presence known. By the sign, neither of them could tell what kind of art it was, but they ducked inside anyway. "Hey there!" A gentleman greeted them right as they stepped inside. "Thank you for stopping by." "Oh, you guys aren't the two from the—" "We are," Boris cut him off. "The Innocence Project, right?" "Yeah," the man nodded. "Yeah. I watched it last night. What a crazy premise, throwing two people together, but it's not the worst idea either. Aren't we doing the same thing when we use a dating app or meet someone in the store? At least y'all had a professional matchmaker to look at your information and match you up accordingly." "Yes," Boris agreed. Asa smiled. "Well, how's it going so far?" "It's going," Asa said, glancing sidelong at Boris. "We're on our way to the art museum. We just wanted to stop in here since it was on the way." The man smiled. Nice. Don't let me hold you up any longer." He gave another smile to them both before shuffling out of the way. "I feel like people are more invested in this than we are," Asa commented as they continued through the little gallery. "They are," Boris agreed. "People like two things. They like a spectacle and they like love, and this combines them both. I can't believe they're saying we had the most chemistry. I was upset when I saw you on stage." "You know what they say." Boris smirked. No, I do not." "What do they say?" "They say hate and love are very close together. Sometimes people hate others because they're afraid to love them." "Oh," Asa crooned, "I don't think that's the case." Boris chuckled. "So it's not." As they turned to leave, Boris brushed past him to take the lead, and their shoulders bumped into each other. It was in fact the first time they'd made any sort of physical contact, and Asa sucked in his breath in surprise. That spare bit of contact was electric, like striking metal against flint, and it froze him in his spot. He looked on as Boris reached the door, trying to settle the swarm of butterflies that had just exploded in his belly. "Are you coming?" Boris prompted, honey-brown eyes meeting Asa's. "Yeah," Asa stammered, blushing as he caught up with Boris. Chapter 8. Boris. He liked seeing Asa happy. Asa's dazzling smile lit up the room and set Boris' heart fluttering each time he saw it. At first it was just something he liked, but soon it became something he craved. Luckily for him, Asa's smile never left his face at the museum. Asa darted around the museum, explaining painting after painting to Boris, from the historic context to the artistic elements. Boris trailed behind him, smiling each time their gazes met. They were the last ones to leave the museum. In fact, the director held the place open an extra 30 minutes as Asa explored the last room of the exhibit. Exploring the museum had worked up an appetite, so they stopped in for pizza before they started on the way back to Boris' place. It had been a good day, all things considered. It had been one of the best days Boris had in a while. The morning had started rocky, as it always did when sleep let his guard down and memories flooded his brain, but Asa had helped. He'd been a salve on raw skin, and the day had only gone up from there. Asa had bloomed as the day progressed. He had been tense and a little closed off in the morning, but by the end of the day his guard had dropped completely. This was an Asa Boris could fall in love with, and based on the way his heart galloped each time their gazes met, he was reasonably confident he had. On their walk back to his place, Asa rehashed the day, focusing mainly on his favorite part, the art museum. Boris listened, adding in a point here and there, but mostly enjoying the giddy way Asa talked about their outing. As the crowd grew thicker, Boris shifted from walking beside Asa to walking slightly behind him, eventually putting a hand at his waist and guiding him through the sea of people. Once they were inside Boris' neighborhood, however, the streets quieted down again, and he moved his hand away. "I like it," Asa said, regarding Boris as he resumed walking beside him. "I like your hand at my back." "Do you?" Asa nodded. "I might like it more if it were in mine." Boris paused and then smiled a little. "Okay. I see." Once he was beside Asa again, he reached for the other man's hand, sliding their fingers together and then squeezing. Your consensus? I do like it more. Boris smiled. Good. They walked in silence for a few blocks, hand in hand and enjoying the setting sun and the cooler night air. As they turned a corner, Asa looked up at him. What do you want to do when we get home? Asa said. Home? Asa's cheeks bloomed into a blush, and he looked away. Back at your place which is up ahead, right? What should we do when we get back? It's still rather early yet. Perhaps we could relax and watch something on television? Are you asking me to Netflix and chill? Asa lifted his eyebrows. No. I was thinking we could watch something on television and relax before bedtime. The skepticism didn't leave Asa's gaze. I will watch something with you, but I don't want to watch the news. The news is too depressing, and if you're trying to Netflix and chill with me, I'm not going to chill with the news. Boris shook his head. I do not know what Netflix and chill means, but I will take your word for it. Do you have a movie in mind you would like to watch? We'll see what's on when we get back. I do favor action movies though. Or dramas. All right, Boris chuckled. They were only a few blocks away, and once they turned another corner, the house was visible from the street. It had been a long day and a good day, but Boris still breathed a sigh of relief as he stepped onto the sidewalk path leading up to his front door. A second sigh of relief happened when he stepped inside. He reluctantly let go of Asa's hand as he kicked his shoes off. Find something to watch, Asa instructed. I'm going to go change clothes. The younger man disappeared in the guest bedroom, leaving Boris to fend for himself for a few minutes. He went to his room as well and changed out of his day clothes, switching to a pair of lounge pants and a fresh, soft t-shirt. Then he sank down on the couch and turned the television on. With Asa still in the bedroom, Boris did peek at the news highlights, but he didn't linger. After he caught the headlines, he flipped through the movie channels until he landed on a historic drama, starting in the next 15 minutes. His backup option was a recently released action-adventure. It was another 10 minutes before Asa emerged from the guest bedroom, and again, he looked positively stunning even though he was only wearing a pair of lounge pants and a sleeved shirt. His entire body was covered, but all the outlines were visible, from the peak of his nipples to the print at the front of his pants. You look good, Boris sighed. Thank you. You keep your place very cold, and I'm glad I packed sleeves. Oh, well, I can turn the thermostat up if you'd like. No, it's okay. You'll just have to keep me warm. Asa grinned as he slumped onto the couch beside Boris. And maybe a blanket or something too. Smiling, Boris took a blanket off the arm of the couch and spread it across them, offering Asa much more of it. I picked this historical drama. Boris nodded to the screen. Sure. Asa smiled. I'll get the lights. He slid out from under the blanket and sauntered over to the wall, flipping the light switch before coming back and wiggling back under the blanket and next to Boris. The second time he settled down, he sat even closer to Boris. Their bodies were touching, legs brushed up against each other, shoulders pressed together. Boris glanced down at him, but Asa had fixed his attention on the television in an unblinking stare. It had been too long since he'd done this type of mating dance, but the steps came back to him as he watched Asa. He draped an arm across the back of the couch, opening his body up to the other man, who promptly leaned into him more. Asa, Boris whispered, wary of interrupting the excitement on the television, but when prompted, Asa looked up at him with a dreamy gaze. Yes, he responded. I'm going to kiss you. Yes. Asa smiled. Boris leaned in, and Asa sat up to meet him, mashing their lips together clumsily. With a chuckle, his free hand came to Asa's cheek, steadying him a little better for the next one. Asa's lips were soft and plump and sweet-tasting just like Boris had imagined, and though they'd both eaten a hefty dinner, Boris was hungry again. He groaned against Asa's lips, easing him back onto the couch and sliding on top of him as they continued, each kiss getting hungrier and heavier, until they were tugging at each other's clothes. Chapter 9. Asa. It had been almost a year since he'd been in bed with someone, and he hadn't had any intention of breaking the fast, but Boris made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Boris was slow and patient and attentive. The way his hands moved over Asa's skin sent electricity down Asa's spine, and he found his body arching up to Boris as he scattered kisses all over his bare skin. He almost came just at the sight of Boris between his thighs, but he held on for a tortuous 10 minutes instead, gripping Boris' swollen bicep and burying a hand in his hair at the same time. The older man didn't stop there, though. After he swallowed all of Asa, he shifted their positions and slithered up behind him before sliding between his thighs again. Asa closed his eyes as he explored, gripping the blanket and the couch cushion as Boris' thick fingers found his hole and then replaced them with his cock. "Fuck," Asa groaned as Boris pushed inside him. He went slow at first and picked up the pace gradually, until he buried himself inside Asa with each thrust. Asa buried his face and his groans in the blanket while Boris dotted kisses along his neck and shoulders. "You're so beautiful," Boris whispered to him, running his nose along the shell of his ear. He rested a hand on Asa's hip, holding him in place as he continued thrusting into him. "Thank you," Asa gasped. Fuck. Every part of him was on fire, and it wasn't that Boris was doing something magical. It was the connection they developed, the fact that Boris paid attention to him. Boris had tried, even through Asa's reluctance, and they'd had the best first date Asa had ever experienced. He felt seen and understood and taken care of, and he loved it. Just thinking about it, paired with Boris' soft moans against his ear, spiraled him close to another climax, and he burrowed even deeper into the blanket. His body shuddered and arched as he got closer, accepting every deep thrust Boris offered. Close. Asa trailed, getting as best a warning out as he could as Boris brought them both home. He felt every wave of Boris' climax as he painted the blanket with his. Damn, Boris exhaled a gravelly laugh. Stay inside. Asa reached behind him and gripped Boris' hip. I like how it feels. Damn, Boris grunted again. All right. It didn't take long for Boris to fall asleep, but Asa was wide awake for some time after. He finished watching the movie and let the next one come on as he turned over his thoughts. Boris, on the surface, was a great guy. Even under the surface he was amazing, but ever since his prison time, Asa had a habit of checking out the space he was in, even the nooks and crannies. Boris' space had revealed something interesting and perhaps even unsettling. He had weapons stashed everywhere. In fact, they were sleeping above one too. Asa had noticed it the other evening and checked while Boris wasn't paying much attention. He was no stranger to hidden weapons, but it swirled questions inside him. Why? What had Boris been through, where he felt the need to keep a safety device in every room? Under the beds, in the cabinets, under the couch and table? It was as Asa finally drifted off with these thoughts circling in his head when he jolted awake again. The movie playing had been action-adventure, full of explosions and gunshots, but this noise was different. It wasn't manufactured in a studio. It was real. The front door swung open, and a man wearing black from head to toe burst inside. Asa and Boris bolted upright, and Boris reached under the couch. Illuminated by the oscillating light from the television, Asa saw the glint of a firearm in the intruder's hands, and quickly saw the same in Boris. His heart galloped. Don't move. I'll shoot, the intruder cried. Boris unlatched the safety. The distinctive sound sent ice down Asa's back. Asa sucked in a deep breath and moved between them both, directly in the line of both weapons. He should have been freaked out. His heart should have been pounding out of his chest, but he was calm, eerily so. What do you want? Asa asked, voice firm and unyielding. He'll shoot you dead if I move, so tell me what you need or leave. Fuck off, the intruder yelled. I'll shoot you too, damn it. Asa's nostrils flared. How much money? You put your weapon down, and I can get my wallet. I don't want your fucking money. His weapon-wielding arm had drooped, but at his words he yanked it back up again. "If we weren't here, you would have stolen the television, maybe, stolen some smaller items and pawned them. I'm cutting out the extra work. And besides, there are probably cameras all around this property. You'd be caught before you got home with your goods." Asa glanced over the man's head. "And also, between you and me, you'd be someone's punk in the pen. I'll give you my cash, and I'll write you a check." "I wouldn't be no punk." Asa smiled. "I'll write you a check, and we can pretend this never happened. Or you can continue down this path, and between the three of us, we'll see who the punk is." He understood why he wasn't scared. He wasn't scared because he was excited, because the rules of the street had always made more sense to him than the rules of the office. The office had pleasantries and unspoken rules, but the rules of the street meant anything goes. He'd sized this guy up. He could take him easily. The variable was the weapon. Guns had a mind of their own, and even despite it, he felt the man he was before clawing at his insides, desperate for freedom. "I won't ask again." "How much?" The warmth in Asa's voice evaporated, and his gaze fixed on the intruder. "You ain't got what I need." "Bet," Asa replied. "I need 2 bands. Minimum." "Okay." Asa looked at Boris, who hadn't budged from his defensive position. The wildness was in his gaze. "Put it down," he commanded, voice softer than the one he had used with the intruder. "No," Boris snarled. With a deep breath, Asa touched Boris' forearm and slid his hand down to his wrist. "Please. I can take care of this. We're safe. I promise." He felt around the firearm, latching the safety again before fishing it out of Boris' tight grip. Without the gun, Boris' hands trembled, and his resolve crumbled. The gun was the only thing holding him steady. "I need you," Asa started, speaking clearly and definitively, "to go get my wallet from the guest bedroom." Still staring with wild eyes, Boris nodded and started down the hall. "What the fuck is his problem?" the intruder asked. "His problem is if I weren't here, you'd be dead on this floor right now," Asa replied. "For your stupidity, you would have deserved it. Do you not see the cars in the driveway? You didn't notice the television?" Asa shook his head. "Wait," the intruder lifted his black balaclava. "I recognize you." "How?" Asa arched an eyebrow. "You probably don't remember me at all, but I was in the pen for 3 months and you looked after me." Asa watched him. Was it for something as stupid as breaking into an occupied house? Drug possession. "And you repay me by being stupid again?" Asa arched an eyebrow. "Look, man. Life is hard. People don't want to give you a job after you've been locked up. Bills still come due, and my kids still have to eat though." "What's your name again?" "Tadarius." "All right. Look out for me sometime next week." Tadarius nodded, and when Boris entered the room again, Asa wrote the man a check and sent him on his way. "We should go to bed," Asa murmured as he watched Tadarius disappear in the darkness. "Sleep with me," Boris suggested. Asa glanced over his shoulder at Boris, studying him as he tried to judge the honesty of the offer. After a few moments, he nodded. "I am Big Spoon this time," he said. "You've earned it," Boris replied, forcing a little chuckle even though his body hadn't fully shaken off the stress of the event. He planted a chaste kiss to Asa's cheek. "I'm glad you were here." "Me too," Asa smiled, cheeks warming at Boris' touch. "Go ahead and get the bed ready. I'll be there in a minute." With another kiss, Boris retreated down the hallway. Asa sighed as he watched. Then he tidied the living room. He turned off the television, folded the blanket, and even tucked Boris' firearm back where it lived under the couch. They both had baggage, loads of it, but it was something the other could carry, and for perhaps the first time in his life he felt giddy and content. He felt like things could work. He felt hopeful. Epilogue. 6 months later. Boris. The exit interview they had on the Monday following the best weekend of Boris' life went better than anyone could have hoped for. Sitting on the stage, hand in hand, they told all of the safe-for-work bits about their weekend. They left out how they spent the entire Sunday enjoying each other from head to toe, but the hint was in Asa's eyes as he deflected. The prize was an all-expenses-paid beach vacation, and 6 months later, at late summer going into fall, they finally had the chance to take that vacation. They left the next day for their trip, and today, Boris was finishing up tasks at the office before he left for the day. As he shut his laptop, a droopy-faced yellow Labrador lifted his head and thumped his tail on the ground. "Come on, Major," Boris said, and the dog wiggled right over to him, rubbing against his side before standing politely. "Go find Asa." The dog's whole body wiggled as he took the instruction and bounded to the door. He pulled the rope handle installed just for him and wiggled out once the door opened. 5 minutes later, Major returned with Asa smiling behind him. "Hi," Asa greeted Boris. "Hello," Boris grinned, leaning back in his seat. Major licked both their hands before returning to his bed in the corner and flopping down again. "What time is it?" "It's 5:01 p.m., Boris said, turning his desk clock to face Asa. "This means our vacation has officially started." Asa smiled and strolled over to Boris' desk, sitting on the corner of it and leaning in for a kiss. "Good," he whispered against the other man's lips. "Are you really going to kiss your boss like this in the workplace?" Boris feigned sternness, but as Asa twisted around and slid right into his lap, he grunted. "Yes," Asa giggled. "I sure as fuck am." He slid his arms along Boris' shoulders, closed his eyes, and kissed him again. "Terrible." Boris chuckled, accepting the kiss and deepening it until he wished they weren't at the workplace. He broke the kiss finally, setting Asa on his desk so they both could take a breath. "After the trip, we'll finish moving your belongings from storage?" "Yeah," Asa agreed, biting his bottom lip as he watched Boris. It was clear his mind wasn't on the conversation at hand. "I can't wait to spend a week with you on this vacation. No work, no one to interrupt us. I want to fuck so much the people at the hotel will wonder if we've died." Grim but appealing. Asa laughed. "Okay, sorry. I'm just saying, I don't even care if we see anything around the area. I just want to be with you the entire time." "I'm glad," Boris replied, "because I was thinking maybe we should just get married." Asa blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Yes." Boris shrugged, pretending to be casual even though his heart was pounding. "We already see each other every day, and I don't suppose you have any plans to trade for a better model, do you?" "No, I quite like this model." "All right then. If it pleases you, I think we should get married." Tears sprang to Asa's eyes, and he brushed them away as they formed, looking away from the older man. He looked around the room, avoiding Boris' gaze until he finally dragged his attention back to him. "All right. But I want a red velvet cake with cream cheese icing." "You can have whatever you want, my love, because I've already gotten everything I could have ever asked for." "Perfect." Asa smiled, biting his bottom lip as he slithered right back into Boris' lap and kissed him again.